In this video, we're going to walk through the process we're going to use to create the hypothesis statement as part of the larger hypothesis testing process. And there's a few steps in here that we added that aren't shown in the textbook, and we added them because we found that students had a much easier time not only writing the hypothesis statement taking this approach, but also in correctly writing the conclusion at the end of the hypothesis testing approach. So before we move into that, just a quick note or two about the hypothesis statement. That contains two pieces, the null hypothesis and the alternate hypothesis. The null hypothesis we abbreviate as H sub 0. The alternate hypothesis we abbreviate as H sub 1. And when we write out the hypothesis statement, we're going to write them out paired together. And keep in mind the H sub 0, the H sub 1 are labels. What's going to follow those labels are statements about the population. For now, we're going to start with statements about the parameters like the population proportion P or the population mean mu. And as you can see in the couple examples down here, just as shown, the null and alternate in each of these cases have no overlap. And what we're going to find is we're either going to stick with one of those or we're going to move to the other, but let's see how that goes ahead and plays out. So the process that we're going to use is within the setup of the question, there's going to be the claim. And we're going to rewrite this claim in symbolic form. So if it's about a mean, we're going to use mu. If it's about a proportion, percentage, we're going to use P. The next step after we do that is one that's not in the book. And this is where we write the opposite case of what the claim was. So between two numbers, there's three possible relationships: less than, greater than, equal to. So when we write the claim and write the opposite, we have to make sure that all three of these get accounted for. After we have both of these written out, now we can go ahead and fill in the hypothesis statement. The part of the null hypothesis will always get the equal case. Never an exception to that. The alternate hypothesis will get the strict inequality. That can be the less than, that can be the greater than, or it can be the not equal to. Not equal to represents less than or greater than. I'm also noting on this page that the alternate hypothesis elsewhere can be denoted as H sub A. I just wanted to throw that in there in case you look elsewhere and see H sub A instead of H sub 1. It's a coin flip choice between what an author will use, and unfortunately not universal. So we have these two cases written out, but to help us write the conclusion at the end, this is the other step that we're adding. After the null hypothesis, we're going to be writing in R. After the alternate hypothesis, we're going to be writing in S. And the reason for that is if it's the null hypothesis that represents the claim, in the conclusion, we're going to talk about whether or not we have the evidence to reject that claim. But if it's the alternate hypothesis that represents the claim, in the conclusion, we're going to talk about whether or not we have the evidence to support the claim, hence the R and the S. And again, these two additional parts of this that we added that aren't appearing in the book has made the process so much easier for students, and this has played out over the last several years. So in our first example, we're going to start with the claim that fewer than 95% of adults have a cell phone. Whether or not you have a cell phone, that's a categorical variable, so we're going to be using proportions. So our population proportion fewer than 95% means that P would be less than 95%. So that's our claim translated into symbolic form. Now we're going to write the opposite of that, and we're going to keep in mind the opposite of that not only is the greater than case, it's also the equal to case. So our opposite is P is greater than or equal to 95%. Next, we're ready to write the hypothesis statement. And since we're talking proportions here, it's going to be proportions down in the hypothesis statement. Our 95% is going to be our value down there. You're going to see that written in decimal form, so that's how I wrote it here. And the null hypothesis gets the equal case, so we write the equal in there. And the alternate hypothesis gets the strict inequality. That was the less than case. Now, the opposite case had a greater than or equal to, and we just kind of drop off the greater than when we write the hypothesis statement. The reason for that is the null hypothesis, that's what the probability gets computed off of, and that's just the equal case. So that's why we only put the equal to in a case like this. But by having them both written here, we can see that the claim didn't have the equal to it. That's why that's what we take down there. So I've included the R after the null, the S after the alternate. And when we look at both of these and wonder which one looks most like, if not identical to the claim, it is the alternate hypothesis because that has the less than case into it that the claim did. So here I'm noting that it's the S, I crossed out the R. And since it's the S, when it comes time to write the conclusion, we know we're going to be talking about whether or not we have the evidence to support this claim. Taking a look at a second example, we have the mean pulse rate of adult males is 70 beats per minute. So population mean, that's mu, is 70, mu equals 70. The opposite of mu equals 70, mu does not equal 70. And in this case, we're going to see the hypothesis statement play out pretty much the same there. So the mu is going to be in there, the 70 is going to be in each of those. The null hypothesis gets the equal case. The alternate hypothesis gets the strict inequality. That's the not equal case. We throw the R and the S after the null and alternate respectively. And then going back to which one of these looks most like, if not identical to the claim, that is the equal case. So this time we're going to note that it's the R. That's why I crossed out the S here. And when it comes time to write the conclusion, we're going to be talking about whether or not we have the evidence to reject this claim. So as you work through these, carefully translate the claim, then make sure that your opposite has all of the other cases in it. Write the hypothesis statement out. The null always gets the equal. The alternate always gets the strict inequality. And then just take the few extra seconds to put the R and the S after that and note which of those two parts of the hypothesis statement represent the claim, because that's going to make writing the conclusion a lot easier.